Welcome to the ISIG audio blog. I'm Rosemary Hassenloff, Ambassador for Region 7 here on the west coast of the U.S., and I'm here with Cynthia Stackpole. Cindy is a professional project management consultant, instructor, and author. She's an active volunteer with Project Management Institute. And the reason why we're here today is that she's project manager for the PMBOK Guide 4th edition. And I know that many of you listeners are thinking, we dread this upcoming PMBOK as it took us many hours to memorize the old one. And Cindy is here today to fill us in on some reasons why this version provides more clarity than confusion. So I welcome our listeners to this ISIG audio blog to discuss the PMBOK Guide 4th edition, Coming Attractions. So Cindy, what was a specific incident that inspired you to be the project manager for this version of the PMBOK?
Well, as you mentioned, I was on the Standards Mag at the time, and there was this big push to say, okay, at the end of 2008, let's release PMI's 4 big standards all at once. It's sort of a commemoration of the 25 years of PMI being in standards. So they were going to release the PMBOK Guide, OPM3, the standard for programs, and the standard for portfolio management. So I had just gotten done with that conversation at a MAG meeting, and in addition, I was getting ready to retake the PMP, not because I failed it, but because I teach it and I needed to take the new test. I just want to make that clear. Anyway, so as I was studying the 3rd edition, I kept finding myself going, God, if I was doing the PMBOK, I would do this different, or I would change this. So after a while, I got really tired of hearing myself whine about it. So I got on the phone with Steve Firencrow, who at the time was over knowledge delivery, and I also called Ruth Ann Guerrero, who at the time was the standards manager, and I volunteered, and they were kind enough to accept, probably chuckling behind their hands, but accept my volunteering for that position. So that's how that happened.
Well, thank you so much for volunteering. And what's the story behind the Coming Attractions?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, I want people to know that the content, they're not going to have to look at all new content. There was a huge change in content from the 2000 edition to the 3rd edition, and really it's not that much. There's a lot of similar content, but there are some process changes, and mostly I wanted to provide a consistent structure and some points of clarification. So that's mostly what we focused on.
Excellent. And so the first point that you wanted to talk about today was process group changes. Can you fill us in on some key changes there?
Absolutely. One of the things that the 3rd edition did was it began the transition from the process names themselves going from noun verb to verb noun. And people were very confused about that. They said they need to be all one way. So, of course, we finished that. So all the process names are now verb noun. Okay, that's a minor cosmetic change. We did take out some processes. We took out preliminary scope statement, developed preliminary scope statement. And the reason we did that is it's really, we talked about progressive elaboration as one of the way we manage projects. So a preliminary scope statement and scope statement are really the same thing. It's just a degree of progressive elaboration. So we felt comfortable taking that out. And then the other thing we did is we took out scope planning. And in the 3rd edition, they took out schedule planning and cost planning, or whatever they used to be called, and said these are part of the overall project management plan. Those artifacts, like the scope management plan, the cost management plan, schedule management plan, are really components of the overall project management plan. So we just said, scope planning was kind of left in there, and we took it out because we didn't feel it was adding any value on its own. As far as additions, especially since I'm talking to IS and IT people, I think everybody in IS and IT kind of understands that before you do a project, you have to collect requirements. And even though, I was a little concerned about putting that in because is that the same terminology we use in construction? Is that the same terminology we use for aerospace, for government? I don't know if it is or not. But I pushed on some of my team members because we had an internal website. And I pushed on them, and they all said, yeah, you can use that term. So, of course, we need to collect requirements. It's one of the fundamental first things we do. So we added that. And then, of course, who has requirements? Stakeholders. As an initiating process, we need to understand who our stakeholders are and identify them, because they're the one who give us requirements. That's the reason we do projects, is because of stakeholders. So those are the two processes, the two new processes: identify stakeholders, collect requirements. Another thing we did was we took procurement from 6 processes and we smushed them into 4. So there's no content that's missing. We just did a little bit of consolidation. And then finally, we moved some processes that were in the monitoring and controlling process group to the executing process group. And those processes are managing the project team and managing stakeholders' expectations. And the reason we did that is these processes particularly deal with people, not with documents, not with artifacts. And I think it's a myth to think we can control people. We can execute them, but we can't control them. So that's why we moved that.
Well, excellent. That sounds like excellent clarification. So the second point that you had wanted to talk about was the project management plan versus project documents. What pain point or confusion in the industry were you trying to address there?
Okay, good. This is a great question. I think that most people misuse the term project management plan. Maybe not misuse it, but it's not used with the precision it could. A lot of times you'll hear people saying, oh, my project plan, my project plan, my project plan. Okay, and then they hand you a Gantt chart, right? So that's hideous in and of itself. But the project management plan is a plan that describes how you're going to manage the project. And how you're going to manage the project is you have subsidiary plans. We talked about it. How am I going to manage the schedule? How will I manage the budget? How will I manage communication? But you also, in order to have that, you also have baselines. My schedule baseline, my scope baseline, my cost baseline. And then there's things that talk about approach. What's my approach to change control? What's my approach to configuration management? That type of thing. Those are parts of your project management plan. They talk about how I manage the project. The other stuff that people will lump into the project management plan are actually documents that assist them, but they're not the plan, such as an assumption log, a responsibility assignment matrix, performance report. That stuff is a project document that helps you to manage, but it isn't how you will manage. So I wanted to start to bring some rigor and some clarification behind that.
Well, that sounds like some really good clarifications, alignment with some current trends, and really a desire to increase readability, make sure this information is accessible to any project team leader around the world. And we appreciate you and all of the other volunteers to make learning an easier experience for new project managers. And I'm reminded of a quote by Abraham Lincoln, a very early U.S. president, and he said, I don't think much of a man who is not wiser today than he was yesterday. So thank you, Cindy, for absolutely making us wiser, and the team of volunteers that you helped facilitate and coordinate in the project management industry is absolutely indebted to you, and the countless volunteers who absolutely always give so much of their time and their wisdom to PMI.